Hello, primarily married listeners out there. This is Arioki, or you can call me Everyone. Welcome to the bonus clip from our Ep.3, The Missing Pieces, where we discuss the various ways we can talk to youth about their sexuality and spirituality, specifically around dating and from an approach of self love and self care. I hope that you enjoyed this bonus clip. Be sure to like, comment, and share.
Even though the folks that are coming up behind us are like little cuss generations, because
Yeah.
I would sometimes I sit and I observe like the types of things that they're experiencing from the outside, and sometimes I'd be thinking to myself like, man, if I had the access to the internet, I love to Google things, and I'm like, there's podcasts you can have like you can have mentors that you can
Yeah.
people's lives, the workers right there just at your fingertip. But it's like that's not what's people like. That's not what they're like. I'm on the other side of it, right? They're because what am I trying to say? I think to myself, I'm like, surely 18-year-old girls are all into like these amazing podcasts that are out there. But that's not necessarily the case. They're out they're on whatever's the most popular, whatever's happening now. I have no idea. But I'm like, and so of course I'm interested in like listening to these podcasts and certain little conversations that people are having. I sometimes I'm like, surely these 20-year-olds, like they have it, man, they got all this knowledge and information, all this, but yeah.
I always
What do you be thinking?
feel bad in the sense of the access to information, because working with youth and having a conversation with youth is just like they feel like they have to fix everything. And I always pray about that sense of things, because they know the inner workings of, because I didn't know anything about politics when I was in 5th and 6th grade or even high school. Like I didn't know what really was going on.
You saying something else about our civics in school, but anyways, that's a whole other conversation.
Like they taught us politics, right, political science, but like in the everyday life, I didn't know what policy was and how that affected,
how that looked, and
how that affected why we have these certain type of school lunches, why we have these certain type of books in school, why the school schedule is what it is, like all these things on top of like racial stuff and injustice and human rights,
and why doesn't it change? Like it's like if we know something is wrong, right, or we can improve. No, from a sociological framework, like there's a like slow, like a society changing slowly is ideal, right? And it's like, what? It's like you sit in school and you learn all these things, and then you get out and you're just like, okay, why isn't any of this stuff I just sat in school for 4+ years, why hasn't none of this been applied? Right? It's not until it's like you do the elections at your school, voting for like president, then you become president. You sitting there, you're like, yo, I'm about to have, we're gonna have Jello for lunch, and we about to have hot Cheetos, and then you get there and you're like, wait, what you mean? We can't. So now you have to like,
petition and get all this stuff
and be like, okay, can we at least have like popsicles on a Friday? Like
go to town hall meetings,
right? Go to the school district, go and speak with the superintendent, but before that, the principal and the PTA and right. And so, but I don't, even that is a good example, which I don't think a lot of people even experience that in school, having the just the mock elections in a sense, right? To even understand it for when you're out. We're talking about politics now.
But I know, but I look at it from that standpoint of the like having access to information all times, and also not being protected from the information, because things like we said, YouTube, you can set up a child YouTube page and still get all this crap coming across it. So it's just like, even when they're not seeking information, even when they're not seeking being exposed to these different things, there's no control of what's coming on their timeline, what's coming on their For You page, what's coming on their newsfeed. So I always pray for their generation in that sense, because I have talked to youth who's like, well, we're not going to have a world because of global warming. We need to fix this. We need to fix racism. We need to fix, well, like, and they feel like it's their job to fix it, and so they take on all of this responsibility before they're even 18. And so it's just like,
to fix things. Is that what you feel
yes,
like you're hearing from you?
yes. I worked one-on-one with youth from 2017 to 2022, and these was their conversations. And I had youth from 3rd grade to 19 years old, and this is the same conversations.
Yeah.
So it's just like,
and see, at the end of the day, like that can sound so overwhelming, right? And I did, when I hear that, because sometimes I feel like, having a human experience, sometimes we do feel like, oh man, like, whoa, like we have to fix the world. And it goes back to self. Like, what are you doing to your house? What are you doing in your house being your body? Right? What are you feeding yourself mentally, physically, emotionally, spiritually? Are you paying attention to your eye gates, to your ear gates, right? It has to, like, how are you what every day we're supposed to
daily doses?
Not necessarily daily doses, but we meditate on what is good. Right?
Right.
How do we go in within ourselves and start our day refreshed and renewed? How do we renew ourselves each day?
Yeah.
Right? Because, and that's something that I continue to learn. It's like you have, by changing yourself, it starts with you, right? Love God with all your heart, all your mind, all your soul, right? And then love your neighbor as you love yourself.
Right.
What does that look like?
Yeah.
What does that look like in real time? I have this conversation with the kiddos all the time. What does that look like? 5 and 8, and I talk to them just like I'm talking to you. So sometimes I'll be like, "Ooh, Lord, help me be able to relate to them and their ages."
It's good. It's good. Like, yes, we definitely should be teaching that foundational piece of like how we should start our day and how we should stay connected to ourselves and to our Creator, all the things. But they're still getting thrown all this other stuff. Yeah. That's, like I said, they're not always seeking out to be exposed to. So yes, we can teach them like guard your heart and your soul gates. But there's just so much.
And that's I mean, and even to your point, with that being said, like, it's like, are we talking to someone else who was born and raised, like,
oh yeah, as a Christian,
right,
not a Christian,
right. So I'm like, so what?
But there,
what
I feel
advice
like
do you give?
I feel like
transferable.
Yeah, like I've had plenty of conversations with you because I'm all about self-discovery and exploration and understanding yourself.
Yes.
And like how you show up and what that means. But yeah, and most of my talk is through a Christian lens. Regardless. Yeah. So it's just gonna come off that way. But just protecting your eyes and ears.
Like, what does that mean?
No, I mean they can understand that if you explain to them what that looks like.
Yeah.
Even without saying to protect your soul and your your heart and all the things. But even if soul or heart, a lot of people are spiritual these days. They could take that. It may not be from a Christian stance, but so I wouldn't worry about terminology. I think that message alone is universal and can reach any age group with any background, spiritual or religious background.
Well, what advice did you give those youth that you worked with?
So I remember one conversation I was driving to you. This was post after I stopped work because I still keep with a lot of the youth that I work with. So I would still like pick them up, take them out, see how they're doing, all the things. So it was conversation then, because she was dealing with stuff, not only just that pressure, but she also had a really unsafe household she was living in. So that conversation was pretty heavy. Yeah. But the way that I tried to reinforce self was like, well, how, like you said, like, how are you doing? How are you doing? Not how the world is doing, not how, mom and dad are doing, not how siblings are doing. How are you doing? What is something that you're focused on right now? How do you feel physically? How do you feel emotionally? How do you feel mentally?
What's going well?
What's going well? Yeah, what's going well? Like, what is something you have to look forward to? What are ways that you can really? Because at that time too, she was trying to figure out like, because she's about to go to college. She's trying to figure out like what she wants to do in school, or if she even wanted to go to school. So it was just like bringing it back to self, was a lot of the conversation, and how she can sustain her happiness, her daily happenings. Um, yeah, it's it's a lot.
It's a lot. There's a lot to unpack too in working with youth. So we're going to talk about that on the flip side. Yeah, but yeah, I and so I someone I know who is heavy into youth, specifically Black boys, um, was really like trying to figure out what like how do you address certain things, and I was like, I'm gonna be honest with you, I'm gonna keep it trend. Like I don't know how anyone navigates life without having
Christ.
yeah, and I'm like without having a foundation, like without being rooted
in something
in Christ.
In Christ, spirit, but it's some people just
outside of yourself
don't have anything at
all.
No.
And I'm like,
I'm just like,
big. And
you
I'm
don't
like,
believe
how do
in
you
nothing?
even? Yeah. And so our conversation was more so like, how do you even, as like a mentor, like, how do you provide wellness without like, especially when it comes to like your job, right? And not like inserting your beliefs in there too, right? It's so because I'm like, yo, it is what it is. But
so spirituality is always going to be part of wellness.
I agree.
That's one of the 6 domains of wellness is spirituality. So talking about spirituality, you don't have to mention Christ. You can mention Christ from a perspective of your like what works for you, right? My faith in Christ is what works for me and my wellness. That's how I speak when I speak to people, even you. Like, I'm Christian. This is what I'm founded in, and this is what sustains me and helps me build from to sustain the rest of the other areas of wellness. But spirituality is part of self.
Yeah.
So whenever I speak of the 6 domains of wellness, I always speak about, well, how do you view yourself? How do you love yourself? How do you take care of yourself? What inspires you? What brings you joy? What makes you you? And that's a part of spirituality as well. So I take it from more of that stance when I'm speaking about spirituality. If I don't want to be like super pushing Christianity, I speak from that part of spirituality of just like things that are bigger, things that are you, but also bigger than you. Like giving back. That's also could be a spiritual experience. Being in nature is a spiritual experience. Like things like that. I speak of in spirituality way. A lot of people look at spirituality of like servitude, but maybe not from our Christian stance, but the servitude of like serving others, loving on others, all those things. So there's various layers of spirituality that you can pull from, and not necessarily push the Christian lens upon, and people are still able to connect to it.
How did they perceive?
I always had great outcomes.
Okay.
Yeah. Because a lot of the people view nature as their spiritual realm of things. So the nature one was always like a low hanging fruit.
Okay.
Which I could connect to because I feel very spiritual in nature too. Like nature is very much part of my faith as well. And so it's just like, okay, I see why they're able to make connections. I make the connection.
Right.
Some people felt like exercise and,
physical,
feeling their body change and warm up and like strengthen them. Like they felt that was a spiritual thing of like evolution and all this stuff. So it's just like, there's a way to talk about spirituality because all of it is created. by our God, our Father. But they just may not see in that perspective.
Makes sense.
They can they appreciate the creation, but they may not identify the creator
Right.
of the creation. You know, so
so that's good. Another something that we kind of conversed about was the same thing that we're talking about as far as like, so you've got that aspect as like a mentor, right, for the spirituality, but then that chemistry and compatibility, because there's a lot of like unplanned pregnancies, and relationships, and what does that look like when you are still, to your point, a youth in a house that can be toxic. You're not relying on yourself, and now you're out making decisions.
And probably out making decisions to avoid being in that house. To be honest, that's usually what I would be out doing. But I was older.
But so
But
there's
still,
that's what kind of like talked about, like, and so seeing an upkick in that. And so how do you also have those conversations when clearly, or or not clearly, that conversations are not being had where you think you're supposed to receive the conversation again from your parents, right?
I mean, sexuality is part of wellness. So I don't feel like there's a restriction around talking about making safe choices when it comes to sex. As a mentor and as being in the work setting, in addition to that, you can still bring it back to self, right? Your own health, your own responsibility. If you struggling,
self-discipleship.
Yeah. If you already struggling to sustain yourself, and you can't sustain yourself outside this household that you can't even get out of, how are you gonna bring a baby into any of this? Like you can still bring that back to your self fortitude of your capacity, who you are, what you want, what your desire. You have. I think a lot of times for youth, especially youth from the demographics that we typically work with, you have to remind them that life is bigger than their environment and bigger than their current circumstances, because that's all they see. Very narrow, very tunnel, very blocked, So it's good to give them something to aspire towards and inspire them, work towards. If they're seeking out sex and pleasure and stuff like that to get out of the house or be like escape or whatever, give them other options, introduce to them other options, allow them to see their options. A lot of times when we're in those spaces, we don't feel like we have options.
True. Yeah.
So,
okay.
But yeah. I'm probably gonna cut all that last part out.
Okay.
But anyways,
all of us talking about politics and youth.
Yeah.
Yeah.